Hello and welcome back to Scouching. Today's video might be a little bit shorter than you're used to for a multitude of reasons we're going to get into, but today we're going to be looking at Metallurg Magnitogorsk forward Danila Yurov. Danila Yurov rocketed onto the scene last season with a 4-goal and 11-point performance at the under-18s as a player eligible for the 2022 draft. He was a major player that helped the Russians get to a silver medal, and hopes were high going into this season that he could be one of the best players available in this year's draft. And surprising very few, he jumped immediately into the KHL, playing 27 games at that level over the course of this entire season, or at least he stepped on the ice in that number of games. So Danila Yurov to me is a tale of two separate data sets that I've tracked this season, and I really had to dig, and pretty much all of the KHL games where he played significant-ish minutes are in my data set for his KHL time this season. But even in his MHL playing time, he never crossed 14 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time, so this is a guy that there just isn't as much of a sample of as others. But 4 games were tracked at the KHL level and 3 were tracked at the MHL level towards the end of the year. And there were some differences that are abundantly clear between the two data sets, but also some similarities that are kind of interesting to think about. So Danila Yurov's MHL data set, as you might expect, is very, very notable in quite a few ways. He managed 9.5 individual dangerous shot attempts per 60 minutes, 73 controlled offensive zone transitions per 60 minutes, over 14 dangerous pass attempts per 60 minutes, and 19.1 shot assists per 60 minutes. Across the board, that's really, really promising. But moving into the KHL, things paint a bit of a fascinating picture. He put up over 13 individual dangerous shot attempts per 60 minutes, but again, this might be a bit of a sampling issue since he didn't play a ton of minutes in these games, but he did register these shot attempts in his limited amounts of ice time, which is certainly notable. But his rate of controlled offensive zone transitions per 60 minutes was halved to 36.6. His rate of dangerous pass attempts per 60 minutes went straight to 0. And he only managed to register 3.86 shot assists per 60 minutes at the KHL level in my sample. The number of pass attempts he makes anywhere on the ice per 60 minutes in the MHL was 110. But in the KHL, that number dropped to 65.5. And his offensive transition involvement went from an absolutely astounding 52% in my MHL data to just 28% in the KHL, which is to me far more pedestrian. But through it all, what is also clear is that on the defensive side of the puck, Danila Yurov was just not much of a factor at all. He currently sits 63rd of 72 tracked forwards with just 6.9% defensive transition involvement, which is not particularly indicative of a strong 200-foot player here. And when he did get involved, there was a 50-50 split of allowing control on those transitions, which put him 48th of the same group of forwards. We'll dive into this a little bit more, but there wasn't a whole lot to write home about that was either overwhelmingly positive or negative about Danila Yurov's defensive game, but it was very inactive in general. So on one hand, you have a player who is clearly a step ahead of the competition in the MHL, at least at this point, constantly transporting pucks up the ice with control, constantly setting up plays in the offensive zone, generating individual dangerous chances at a really respectable rate. And he was either setting up or taking a remarkable 51% of his team's shot attempts when he was on the ice. But the data indicates that at the KHL level, he was pretty much strictly limited to a finisher and basically inactive everywhere else around the ice except for moderately successful offensive transition data. So the big questions from here is, how does that happen and where do we go from here with Danila Yurov? So we'll start with the MHL play, which is more indicative of what he's comfortable with now at a level where he's punching a little below his weight class to identify the type of player we're looking at, and then go to the KHL tape to really see where the shortcomings might be and where the improvements might come to help him get better at that level. Yurov is clearly a player that leads with his brain and processing ability as he moves pucks up the ice. And he just lets his talent do the work for him. He doesn't overdo it on the skill or the flash in his game, but he just goes out and executes really strong plays at the MHL level right now. He can drive in deep in the offensive zone, hold on to the puck, and look for secondary options and make plays there. And he certainly brings enough pace at the MHL level for it to be kind of tough for players to get on top of him and cause problems. He's able to protect pucks and give line mates valuable time and space to fetch loose pucks, or create space himself so that line mates can pick up the puck for him. And I found that there is good but projectable and practical skill with Danila Yurov as well, pulling pucks around defenders and putting pucks into space and little tiny chip and chase plays that I think really separated him from the pack at this level. He can also fire off quick cuts along the boards and evade MHL defending with ease. He did find ways to get into scoring position and generate chances himself and get sticks on pucks, but in ways that I don't really find make him a potential really high-end scorer in the NHL, but he does get his fair share of chances and he earns them. So all of that is really positive, especially in the offensive direction, but the big question is what changed in the KHL? And a lot of people very early in the season were asking the legitimate question of, why isn't Danila Yurov playing more minutes for his KHL club? And my answer to that question came around pretty quickly after watching him in the KHL, and honestly my answer was, why should they? And this is one of the reasons why this video might be a little shorter than usual. When I was watching Yurov in the KHL, he wasn't really doing much. There wasn't anything negative that I clipped and need to show you to show that he's not particularly good at that level, but there was nothing at that level that really showed me a ton that was really impressive. He can be a quick player with aggressive skill to get around MHL defending, but at the KHL level, I felt that it just wasn't enough to drive play up the ice as consistently. He has good offensive instincts and positions himself well in transitions and generated a lot of transitions that way in the MHL, but he lacks a true high-end quickness that I think you need to penetrate high-level defenses. He can be a physically imposing player to cause turnovers here and there in the MHL, especially along the boards and in the offensive zone as well. But in the KHL, I just didn't see it consistently enough where he was causing the same amount of turnovers and really getting himself involved in play as much as he was in the MHL. He just felt a step behind and just too soft to really cause these turnovers and cause physical and position issues. So a lot of this really left me with the idea that Danila Yurov was too good for the MHL and just not quite good enough to drive play in the KHL right now. And this isn't the end of the world, but there aren't really any high-level traits that are truly high enough level where I can point to Danila Yurov and say, this is exactly what he's going to dominate doing in the NHL, and the rest will just have to come out in the wash. There's a lot of good with Yurov, but there isn't anything that really puts him over the top, at least in my viewings of him this season. On the bright side in the KHL, though, you do see flashes of that quickness along the boards and that evasive skill, and there were also some really clever passing plays coming off of his stick that I found at that level, but really it only happened a very small handful of times, so hopefully this does start to come out more over time, and he could become a stronger possession player in that regard. And it's also undeniable, both in the video and in my data, that Yurov at least put himself in scoring position and generated scoring chances at a rate that I didn't really expect. He can be a good tip threat, a good rebound threat in front of the net. He uses his body well to find space himself in front of the net, and maybe he could get some greasy goals that way. But in my opinion, to find success at the NHL level, I think Yurov is going to need to be one of these guys that keeps it simple, executes on standard basic plays just very intelligently and quickly, and recognizing his options before he faces too much pressure, which is something I did catch once in a while in the KHL, leading to the high-end thinking that I think I see with Danila Yurov. So to me, the best part of Danila Yurov's game is his puck management. He is a tough player to get on top of, he has a very good read of where people are on the ice, and he can distribute the puck well to line mates and be a good possession player. If he spots line mates in open ice, it's really no problem. Yurov doesn't overthink it, he hits men in open space and then finds space himself to follow up and be a give-and-go target. And going along with this that I think projects well to the NHL is Yurov's natural sense of body positioning. He just knows how to get between the puck and a defender and give him a chance to fetch the puck, cause a turnover, and get play going in the right direction or prolong offensive cycles. The good part, in my opinion, is Yurov's scoring instincts, especially at the KHL level. I don't have a ton of video to really back up the data that I've tracked because none of his scoring chances seemed particularly threatening, but just because a scoring chance isn't threatening doesn't mean it's not a scoring chance, and there are lots of times in the NHL where goals aren't the most beautiful goals you've ever seen and they just go in. And Yurov is a player who does seem to have a nose for this type of situation in front of the net, and he might be able to bang in a goal here and there from that area of the ice. But when you go back to the MHL level, you do also see more flashes of some open ice skill that might lend credence to him being a better scorer down the line. He can change angles on goaltenders at the last minute, pull pucks around defenders as well to create space for himself. And I think these things, if they can be leveraged and done at a higher pace at the higher levels of the game, will certainly be projectable to the National Hockey League. The not so good part for me is just in general what Yurov's NHL upside might be. And I think with Yurov, there's a lot of good, but nothing that's really great. And to me, that is a little bit of an issue for what his NHL upside might be. You have to be aware of what role a player might play in an NHL lineup. And Yurov is a very smart puck possession player, but that role in regards to value in the National Hockey League carries some value, but this is a player we're talking about that a lot of people have in their top 10, maybe even top 5 at this point in the season. And I have trouble ranking a player that high who doesn't really drive play in any measurable way at the KHL level. There have been other players that I have seen at that level drive play at this age, and I just don't really see the same traits out of Yurov right now. And I think at the KHL level, a lot of that good but not great does really limit his effectiveness at high levels. And I go back to the MHL and look at the quality of defending on entries like this one, and wonder why Yurov doesn't immediately take the chance to cut into a more dangerous scoring area in favor of taking a more low percentage shot from the perimeter. And I do think plays like this bring up questions that might hamper him at the pro level. It'll be interesting to see how he develops, because there is lots that's fine and nothing that I really found that was really poor and notably so, but I also didn't see a whole lot that puts him above a lot of the other elite level players in this draft. So the huge question in the room for Danila Yurov is going to be what happens from here. If he can develop the skill and quickness necessary to really push opposing defenses to their heels at high levels of play, then yes, there might be more that you could extract out of Yurov in terms of an offensive possession winger. It is undeniable, however, that Yurov leads with a strong hockey mind, with great awareness of line mates and a strong playmaker's instinct, at least at the junior level for now. And I think that his ability to spot line mates, execute on simple plays, and maintain possession well can carry him a long ways in hockey. This isn't a player that I think is boom or bust. I do think that there is an NHL player here, and a pretty reasonably solid possession player that could show up well in some analytics, even if he's not scoring a ton of points every season. It'll just be a matter of how much things work down the road in the National Hockey League. Because personally, I have some trouble seeing NHL defenses letting him get away with low-pace evasion like what I'm showing here. But there are bright signs with Yurov, and if he can work on his agility and quickness and the quickness of his hands and build on his skill that he's already got, he could build more of a threatening offensive game that goes along with the strong possession game I think he could bring to higher levels. But in my opinion, drafting really high in the NHL draft probably means you should be aiming for a really high-end offensive upside player regardless of the position they're playing in. Scoring is really hard in the NHL, and if you can score, it makes your life a lot easier. Will Yurov be one of those players? Right now, I'm not totally convinced, and when I look at how his defensive game is right now, that also does worry me a little bit, but there are clear signs of a strong possession winger that could hold on to pucks well and be a good transition player moving pucks up the ice. Should Danila Yurov have played more minutes in the KHL? Maybe. I watched all of the games where he did play relatively standard minutes for a young player at that level, and all of those games were against really low quality teams in the KHL, and even then I really struggled to see him successfully moving play in the right direction consistently. And it just never convinced me that he should be a big time minutes eater at the pro level right now. In all reality, he probably should have been in the VHL this season maybe, because the MHL was just too easy for him, but the KHL just was a little too much. And even relative to previously profiled player Vladimir Grudinin, I saw a lot more play driving out of Grudinin and strong defending out of him at the KHL level than I saw an offensive game and a good transition game out of Yurov at the same age at the same level. But to close, in my opinion, I think there's a relatively strong floor with a strong hockey mind here and good offensive headroom to work with. It's just going to be a matter of how far he can come in the coming years and how much a team values that profile and how much they believe in it and how it could translate to the National Hockey League. So that's it for this one, and thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, you can click all the buttons below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon or join our YouTube membership program by clicking join below. You'll get access to exclusive player visualizations, player cards, a Discord server, merchandise discounts, exclusive data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, as well as plenty of other goodies that you can check out. Or you can pick up some merchandise at the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's it, and we'll see you in the next one.